The other day I made a video on how the trigger group for an 870 works. Now, there's always a feud between the 870 people and the Mossberg 500 people. So, today's video is on the Mossberg trigger and how it works. Start off with, you pull the trigger, that's a hammer right there. I have two models of these guns, this one here, which is a newer model, and the other one you see in one of my videos, which is obviously an older model. They both have pretty much the same parts to it. There's slight differences, but in the way they work the same way. Alright, so let's try to get some views of what's going on here. First thing, you've got the slide release, which is this lever here that goes right to the front, and that's what pushes up on the bolt carrier. And as you see, when the gun is fired, this gets pushed down, so it allows you to release, or it releases the slide automatically, and you could pump it again. See? This right here is the extension for this safety. When you slide the safety, it slides a piece of steel in the way and it prevents you from pulling the trigger physically, obviously. So if this gets broken off, your safety on your Mossberg is pretty much useless. Which, you're not supposed to rely on your safety anyway, but just as a heads up, you got to make sure that in your maintenance of these guns that you check all the parts like that for damage. Moving on, you've got this whole piece here is a trigger. You see down there behind the trigger there's like a cylinder. That's the spring for the hammer. Goes from the back here, the pin's holding it in place. Then you see that extension there. It goes right to the hammer. And that's what gives it the pressure on there. You could see from here the trigger. There's a connecting rod on it. That runs all the way to the front, right here. This connecting rod is what obviously fires the gun. And it also is a disconnect on it. So we'll start by how it fires the gun. As you see the hammer there, you see how it locked into place. See how that's locked into place? And while this thing is up like that, you see how it pushes on that little square block, which is holding the hammer down. Well, as it pushes, it slips off the block and allows the hammer to ride forward. Let's see if we can see that again. Now it's ready to fire. So as you pull the trigger, that goes forward, which pushes this whole bar. And slowly it's like that. Disconnect on this is actually this trigger bar, or the connecting bar, or whatever you want to call it. When it's pushed down, as you see, it's not in contact at all with that little block that's holding the hammer. Now it's in contact, you push down. It's not in contact, you can pull the trigger all day, it doesn't affect it at all. Pretty simple one. Obviously the slide goes back, cocks the gun, goes back, and while it's going there, it pushes down on this. Once it gets into position, this pops up and allows you to shoot. Before it's in position, it'll never allow you to shoot the gun. So say you're ready to fire. You go, you fire the gun. The gun's fired. Now you bring back the slide. It pushes the hammer and it pushes this down. As you see, it disconnects the trigger from the actual sear that's holding the hammer and allows it to pop back into place even with your trigger held. Release the trigger and now it pops back into place and is ready to fire again. That's just how simple this thing is. There's nothing else to it. This only has one function, and it's to release the slide. This is the actual disconnect. On the 870, this will actually also engage the disconnect on it, whereas even with this pushed, you could still pull the trigger as long as the bolt is completely forward. I don't advise to do that. It might not actually work, but from what I see here, as long as this isn't being pushed down by the slide, you are able to fire the gun. Anyways, so that's the basics of how the Mossberg 500 trigger assembly works. If you have any questions, please leave a comment.